All right, this is your Gaza War sit rep day 117. This is military analysis where we do not disdain Arab military capacities and we try to understand guerrilla warfare. I've got John Elmer here tonight. Hey, John.
Hey Justin, thanks for having me back.
Man,
These are doing
John.
great, these shows. Their people seem
Yeah,
to get this news and need it. So I'm
people.
glad to be on with you.
Yeah, man, it's good and people really like whenever you come on. There's a lot of there was somebody in the comments who asked if we were fighting or something. And I was like,
What?
no.
How much more stuff do we have to do together? Like the
No.
only person I talk to.
I just said no, exclamation mark. And they were like, oh, good, good,
Okay,
good,
good.
okay.
Yeah.
So I've often been saying no end in sight when I introduce and I say it's day 116 and there's no end in sight. But there are some weird little things. I don't want to get my hopes up, but there are some weird little hints that we should probably talk about. Namely, I saw this today. One of the spokespeople, um, Osama Hamdan. This is on Arya's feed, of course, which I am on 25 times a day.
Yeah. Good follow, important follow.
Aryjeeay. Yeah. So Hamas leader Osama Hamdan regarding the prisoners exchange. So there's obviously talk over prisoners exchange. He says we have essential concerns regarding the proposed prisoners exchange deal. Israel's proposing a deal to them. We continue to discuss them with different factions to formulate a unified response to present to the mediators. So the ball is in their court. Presumably, they've been offered something they can't agree to, but they're now making their counteroffer. We will seek guarantees for the enemy's commitment, and unless the occupation succeeds on the ground, it will not succeed in politics. So here they're reassuring their people that they're not going to give something up that the Israelis couldn't win on the battlefield. We will not tolerate any undermining of the Palestine Liberation Organization. That's an interesting thing
I
to
think that
say.
must be an allusion to the Palestinian Authority taking over
Yeah.
in Gaza and further entrenching the split, which is something that Yahya Sinwar, who's the leader of Hamas in Gaza, has really been working to mend and to make a unified national front. So I think they're here saying that the imposition of the Palestinian Authority. I'm just interpreting this, but I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
the imposition of the Palestinian Authority would further the divide. Whereas I'm almost willing to speculate that Sinwar is willing to put together like a national unity government
Of
coming out of
course.
this. So
Yeah. They've
I
been
think,
talking about that forever. Yeah.
yeah,
Not forever, but maybe at least since 2017. I mean, the updated Hamas charter, right?
yeah.
And then the primary assurance for the enemy's commitment to any agreement lies in our capability to respond to aggression from diverse arenas. So they're saying we continue to trust. We're not going to disarm when we continue to trust in our ability to
Yeah,
defend
well,
ourselves.
the Palestinian resistance is worried about Israel getting the prisoners in an exchange and then
Yeah, and then
resuming the
just
war,
all
right?
out.
Which is
Yeah, without any restraints. I mean, not that they've been all that restrained on account of the
people
hostages
are
they've
really
lost.
suffering right now. It's the winter, it's raining, their
Yeah,
camps are flooded, there's no food. People aren't looking for 20 days of a break and then to have the war
yeah,
resume. So I
yeah.
think this
That's
is
right.
one of the things that's interesting about Hamas is that they are very principled on this file, and we knew they were going to be principled on the prisoner exchange file. They're not just going to give things up for free.
Yeah,
And so, from what we understand, the Israeli proposal is to do this in stages, to have an initial stage that releases the elderly men who are the husbands of the women who have already been released that the Palestinians intended to release on the first day. We saw a testimony from one of the captives who said that when she got into the tunnels, that the Qassam Brigade's fighters were saying that you're going to go home tomorrow or the next day.
right.
So they were saying to them, and then Sinwar came and visited them in the tunnels on the first day and said that you're going to go home right away because the intention was to immediately um, trade the civilians. There was no intention, and Qassam has made that clear that there was no intention to keep the civilians. The civilians weren't part of it. And in a lot of cases, the civilians were captured by other factions or by um, civilians that came across the wall. So Qassam has taken responsibility for all of the factions' prisoners, which is one of the dynamics that's happening behind the scenes. But they said that they would give back the civilian men for men in Palestinian prisons, elderly men that have been in prison for a long time. And that's a very basic thing, and Israel didn't do it. And as a result, um, I mean, it's possible that as many as 30 of the prisoners are dead at this
Yeah.
point, which is a
And I mean,
crazy number.
horrible deaths, hunted down and shot by the Israeli military,
Yeah.
bombed, of course, in airstrikes, gassed, according to the mother of one of them.
Yeah. Bombed in airstrikes in part because the Palestinians didn't take everybody down into the tunnels. Like a lot of the
Yeah.
people were kept above ground, living in family homes and being treated well in those homes. The
I
juxtaposition is just
I
so
saw
stark.
I saw news of a an Air Force Special Forces unit, Shaldang or something like that.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, and him a major from that unit, a 36-year-old. You usually hear about 19-year-old master sergeants, but a 36-year-old major from this special forces unit was killed in Gaza City, I think, in North Gaza, fighting in Gaza City. And so I was curious. I looked it up. I tried to figure out this unit and how it works. And I gather it's like a battalion sized unit. It's not a big unit. Elite fighters associated with the Air Force, working out of an Air Force base. And I looked at their training, and there's like a list of their training, and they have 6 months of basic training, weapons, these weapons, that those weapons, and then there's a 2-week training course on how to behave if you're captured. And I thought, man, they actually train on being captured. Like what, what like first of all, uh, it's I don't know how much time you want to spend training on something you don't want to happen. There's a lot of things you could practice that you don't want to ever happen. But then second of all, they have this Hannibal doctrine. So you're not going to last 2 weeks in captivity. Your own comrades are going to kill you.
Well, this captive that got released was like she trusted the Palestinians
Yeah.
when they said they're going to that she would be released within a day or two, and then she talks about it in this interview on Channel 12 in Israel, their biggest television channel. She talks about how the first day went by, and then the second day went by, and she was telling herself like, "Oh, Israel's just getting, they're getting themselves together, they're getting organized, they're like resetting after this, whatever, she's making these like, oh, they must be coming for
Jesus.
us.
Bargaining. Yeah, bargaining with
They're not
herself.
coming for you. They don't care about you at all. And then so she's actually a very interesting interview. Her name was Adina Moshe, and she was from one of the communities on the border. But when she was released, um, and the first person that she saw with the Israeli like senior generals that she saw, before she asked anything about her kids or her family or where she was going or who was whatever, she said to him, "Where were you?"
Mm.
And I guess this guy apparently apologized to her, and she said, "There's no penance for this. There's no forgiveness for
I
this."
saw a footage from a funeral from some brother who died, and he was yelling at Benny Gantz, and he was saying, "This is on you." And Benny Gantz was just like completely dead-eyed, just
Yeah.
not
Well,
reacting.
she was like this. She was an elderly
Oh,
woman, and she was like, "This isn't my country." She was like, "In my
wow.
country, we cared about every." She's a grandmother, and three of her kids, three grandkids, are all fighting in Gaza. She's not like from the
Yeah,
peace camp or whatever. She,
right.
acknowledged, and she's saying like, in my Israel, we cared about every single prisoner, which is part of the dynamic of their conscription army, right? Is that
Yeah.
everybody's in the army and you're supposed to care um, in a particular way about that kind of soldier getting captured. But that's the soldiers. The civilians were captured and they didn't care about the civilians.
No, and as we covered a week ago,
Yeah.
they were massacring the civilians. You mentioned the reaction of the Qassam fighter that had this hostage who was released, but and that was on October 7th. So I just wanted to say, more and more of the narrative of October 7th is, I don't know, well, I don't want to say collapsing, because it was always a house built of straw, and it could never stand up. But Haaretz in particular has been constantly revealing contradictory information, and there's this cases of negligence and the spreading of misinformation by the Zaka volunteer group. People probably who watch this have read Max Blumenthal and the Gray Zones investigation of Zaka, and I mean, the utter lack of credibility of Zaka in every way. And you probably saw it, speaking of Channel 12, I guess it was Channel 12, but there was that talk show 4 or 5 days ago where the Israeli host went through a series of clips. The guy who said they hung the babies from a clothesline, and the guy's like, that never happened. And then he said there was this
Yeah, so
woman
it's
who was
Zaka, but it's also the army, right? There was a
yeah,
bunch of army guys who told very detailed stories. Oh, there
yeah,
was 8 babies in that corner. There
yeah,
was a Holocaust survivor, and I could tell by her number on her
yeah.
arm. And then the people that are disproving this are the actual settlement
Yeah,
like
the settlement
councils.
spokespeople are like, that person didn't live here. There's no
Nobody
such
lives here.
person who matches that. And that's amazing. And it's amazing too, because um the Israelis were trying to explain it away, right? On that talk show. There was like someone who was saying, well, they're traumatized. Uh so it all gets a little bit mixed up in their heads. And it's like, how do you mix up babies hanging on a clothesline with not babies not hanging on a clothesline?
Yeah, super detailed lies.
Yeah.
I gotta say, like, I don't think I was expecting that. Like the just
Yeah.
the sort of the level of detail of the pathology is just
And
like,
and then Blinken repeating
yeah.
these,
And then
right?
Biden and
Blinken
Blinken,
repeating them passionately, talking
passion.
about this dinner table, like people eating after they killed people at the dinner table with the
Yeah.
dinner table,
Yeah,
like this
totally made up
Hollywood
story.
scene, a totally made up story. And Blinken's never apologized for that or admitted that that was a complete lie, right?
On the record, right? Like on the United
On the
States official
Yeah,
government record that will go down. And
yeah.
yeah,
So a couple of notes, because you mentioned, I mean, we talked. I think I mentioned UNRWA funding being cut yesterday on the sit rep, and I'm sure you guys talked a lot about it today on the EI live stream, the Electronic Intifada live stream. But there's a couple of things I saw today that are just to add insult to injury. One is the Al Quds News Network in an investigation citing, I guess, Middle East Eye, that a well-known international charity is being forced to pay 5,000 a truck, bribing a company linked to Egypt's General Intelligence Service to get aid into Gaza. So add $5,000 to the overhead of every truck going in to try to mitigate starvation.
yeah, they're
It's,
taking bribes for people getting out too. $10,000 bribes to get out of Gaza during a genocide.
certain other trucks are also making their way across the Middle East. Um, so this was on Israeli Channel 13, that the first time trucks arriving through the land corridor starting from Abu Dhabi in the UAE, crossing Saudi Arabia, then Jordan to Israel. So they are circumventing these Arab countries, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, are circumventing the Red Sea blockade imposed by Ansar Allah, or the so-called Houthis, all in order to feed Israel as Israel starves the Palestinians. So
I don't know. Some of this stuff is just, I don't even know what to say at this point about that.
the
It's so dark.
the absolute cursed nature of these regimes. I mean, it's really, and then just to, I mean, that's as good a transition as any to the Houthis, who did pull off something today. Um, their 23rd attack if you like infographics, I saw this infographic
Oh,
today.
nice.
1 through 23, the Galaxy Leader, the Unity Explorer, the Central Park, all the way to Lewis B. Puller. 2 days ago, the USS Gravely. Yesterday and today we have the US ship Koi, Koi. Looks like, if the graphics are to be believed, this looks like a container ship, because there's lots of containers on it. But the previous two were very clearly, the Gravely and the Lewis B. Puller were naval ships, weapons bearing ships. So this one, and in addition to that, though, U.S. Central Command mentioned that they shot down a surface-to-air missile from Ansarullah today. So they're attacking American air assets in the Red Sea now. And there was a some kind of missile that I'm on this Iranian. Here's an Iranian analyst, Amir. He says, analysis commentary on Iranian geopolitical and military affairs, author of Iran Geo Mill blog. I found him today, but these are the missiles that he thinks were launched. He says it could have been a Bark 2 or a Ta-Air 2 surface-to-air missile. First time the U.S. struck an anti-aircraft missile in Yemen, it posed an imminent threat to U.S. aircraft patrolling the area. So,
Qualitative upgrade
yeah,
in attacks.
It's just
Yeah, so the Ansar Allah have carried out, have fired more than 200 drones and 50 ballistic and cruise missiles during this campaign. But in one of their spokesperson's speeches the other day, they talked about how many ships had made it through, that the shipping to the Suez is not blocked. Shipping to Israel is blocked.
right.
And now, after the U.S. bombed Yemen, the U.S. and UK bombed Yemen, they added them to the target list, which they previously were not on. So that's interesting, because the U.S. has bombed Yemen now, I think, like a dozen times.
Yeah, and including yesterday, I think there was a bombing raid, and this guy Amir, he also thinks that he says I don't usually do this, but there are some things going on in the region right now that are ringing some alarm bells in my head. It's too quiet. There are signs and talk that the U.S. is going into weeks-long campaign in Iraq and possibly the wider region, but it's all being played too matter of fact, and that's not normal. So he's worried about that. But I mean, I was watching your live stream today, and you thought, one of the things I thought, I didn't know what to make of the Kataib Hezbollah statement that they were going to try to de-escalate attacks against the U.S. And I thought maybe it was part of the ongoing negotiations about the U.S. leaving.
Is that not true? That's what I said on the show.
Yeah,
That's what I thought
that's
it
what I
was.
think too.
Yeah.
But I don't know. No, everybody's trying to figure out why they would do that. One day they hit them hard, and then the next day they sort of unilaterally said, "We're not going to hit you for a while."
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing that explains it is the internal dynamic, because yeah, I was surprised by that statement.
Yeah, that's always a really out of left field for me.
So the 180 plus attacks from the Iraqi resistance on American assets in Syria and Iraq.
It's
So
not
these are
clear to me.
significant fronts.
Yeah, it's not clear to me that there hasn't been one today. I was trying to figure out whether there have been any attacks on U.S. targets in Iraq or Syria today, and I didn't
Well, you
see
can
any.
imagine there's a lot of Iraqi resistance fighters who are not on board with
Mhm.
that decision.
And there are different factions. Kataib Hezbollah is the biggest, but not the only
That's right.
such group. Okay, so a couple of things, the last things that we have to talk about today are in Palestine, West Bank, and Gaza. Should we talk about Gaza first, and then talk a bit more in detail about this horrific?
Let's do
Um,
Jenin first and then finish with
okay,
Gaza. Because
all right.
this raid is appalling.
Yeah. And I mean, it's amazing to see them celebrate this and the way that Israelis and the pro-Israel people celebrate this, the way that US spokesperson explains it away. Like, oh, well, they said they're Hamas. I don't know why they did it, whatever. And it's like,
He said, "Let's wait." The State Department said, We don't know all the details of the operation. Let's wait till they come out," which is like the most opposite of October 7th you could
that's what I was
possibly
gonna say.
ever
Like,
be.
what is the argument against October 7th? Like, what argument can you possibly make against October 7th when you're celebrating this?
So,
Uh,
what for
yeah,
people who haven't seen this here,
yeah,
what we're seeing is a Yamam commando unit, Mr. Ravim, dressed like Arabs. I mean, they're dressed like these
like
are
medical
not good.
personnel.
Yeah, they're dressed like medical personnel. What we're seeing is somebody in doctor's scrubs. Somebody's carrying a baby. One of them's carrying a wheelchair. One of them's dressed as a doctor. See, there's the guy carrying a wheelchair. Um, and they stormed this hospital in Jenin and executed three Palestinians literally on their pillows in bed. One of them, whom is already paralyzed. See, there's the baby, the one dressed as a woman carrying a baby. It's really astonishing in this hospital and executed the fighter who's already paralyzed. He's paralyzed in the bed from a drone strike that killed three children. And he's paralyzed. And the two other guys are his brother and his brother's friend who are like feeding him in the hospital because he's paralyzed from an October
Wow.
attack. And they executed them in the hospital beds and then left the hospital.
It's always hospitals. It's like an obsession with hospitals. It's an obsession with killing patients in hospitals.
This is such a cowardly act, and this is such a cowardly act that points to the failure of their military as a fighting force. To brag about this is astonishing because this shows how unable they are to reach these guys,
Yeah.
that they have to take advantage of this paralyzed man who's a teenager, like two of them are teenagers, in and then call them Hamas commanders, as if that somehow justifies this. Um, this is through the
And it's
middle of a
not even
hospital.
in Gaza.
It's like a dozen of them, all
Yeah.
dressed. I mean, their dress up is not compelling. They don't like some of them are wearing masks, like hospital masks, but they're not. Like they're clearly fighters. Like
Yeah.
they didn't
Like
bring
military.
small guns. Um, I don't know what you
No,
would do. Like, what's the response inside like, what should the doctors and nurses and patients inside the hospital do? Like, what's the thing that you would do about these guys coming in with 12 guys in with
nobody can do anything.
there's nobody can do anything. There's nothing you could say. It's not like they had such good costumes that they're able to make it through something that you wouldn't otherwise make it through. I
It's
don't
just
know
some kind
what.
of confusion. I don't know why they bothered, actually. I mean, I
No.
guess, yeah, I don't know why they bothered, other than maybe to produce this footage and celebrate it.
Well, yeah, he's paralyzed. He's not going anywhere. There's no like, it's not like they would have run away. I don't know. It's just unbelievable. And when you remember back to the early days of this war, when Israel was telling us that the Palestinians were bombing their own hospitals
Yeah.
to try to get away, and then now, like the difference from that. Have we heard of a rocket landing in Gaza and killing people since then? Like it's this that made it seem like this was this totally normal thing that's, could be
Yeah.
either one of them. We're not sure who it is.
Right.
Then we
That's
never hear
still,
another
I'm
word.
I'm pretty sure that's still Human Rights Watch's official position, is they think it was an errant rocket that blew up this hospital.
Can't believe some of the stuff we're living through right now.
Yeah, never it would you could never predict. You could never predict that people would be bragging about this.
Yeah.
That
And that
people
the
would be
State Department would
celebrating this.
defend it, right? They don't even say like, "Oh, we're asking about what the heck went on here." They just straight up defended it. Oh, we can't say anything because we all the facts aren't out yet. We need to have like to do the exact opposite thing that we've been doing for the last 4 months about every single significant case, including like international court of justice things, like saying that the premise of the International Court of Justice case, that they just don't buy the premise, so they can disregard the entire case.
Right. And then on a rumor or on Israeli intelligence claim that 4 or 7, whatever, 30, however many UNRWA employees were secretly Hamas operatives. They cut $500 million out of the refugee service agency during
Right. What did you do that on your
starvation.
show yesterday?
I mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the parastate, right? Like
Mhm.
the UN refugee agency is a parastate. They do schools,
They're
they
the
do
body
healthcare.
that's responsible for
Yeah.
all of the Palestinians.
Yeah, more than 2/3 of the population of Gaza. And it's also not just Gaza. They work all over
Yeah.
the region in the camps in Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon too. So
And
it's just,
why isn't it the UN High Commission for Refugees? Because Israel and America wanted it that way so that they could eventually have this option of cutting them off,
yeah.
right?
And so that they didn't fall under the criteria of refugees. I mean, yeah.
Um,
Palestinians can't get refugee status in Canada based on persecution from the Israelis. It's
because
astonishing.
Canada doesn't agree with the premise
That's right.
that Palestinians are persecuted. They probably think the Palestinians are the ones persecuting. Um, okay.
Gaza.
I do want to show you. I was on Sina's Twitter feed, and he reposted this. Someone bragging about the Jenin operation. Karen Zelwar said Israel went in, targeted, and shot Hamas operatives instead of bombing the hospital. Israel targeted the terrorists only. Isn't that what the world has been asking Israel to do? And still you complain? And then they looked up her bio, and she's a feminist, gender equality, and disability inclusion advocate in Australia. So that's what our disability inclusion advocates are apologizing for on social
Executing paralyzed people in the
media.
hospital bed and the two people that are taking care of him.
Disguising yourself as medical person.
Disguising yourself as if you're carrying a baby or as if you're literally the doctor coming in to help somebody.
And still you complain. So Gaza. So Gaza is I've been making maps. I should have just used ChatGPT. Apparently, John, you can just get ChatGPT to do all this stuff, but I
Oh,
have these habits and I still haven't even figured out how to use ChatGPT to do my work for me. So I just use this geographic information software, GIS, and I've been making these maps of Gaza. This is the OpenStreetMap publicly available maps, and it's cute because it has everything in Arabic and then the names of the towns in Hebrew. But if you want to switch to Google, we can just switch to Google, and then everything's in English. Um, sorry, I had to keep zooming in and out. But I found someone in Israel has actually put those target notification blocks on there. You remember those when they
mhm.
when they told people to go from here to there, and so I thought I should just put that on there.
Yeah. So is
Someone,
that correct? Is there 2,400 blocks?
yeah,
Gee,
yeah. And what did they do? Did they send this to people's phones, or did they airdrop a picture of it and say you are in block 2270, proceed to block 2280 where it's safe, and then they bombed that next block, right?
They've done both. So they've dropped QR codes
Okay.
from the sky in
Yeah.
leaflets, which nobody has any power on their phones. Um, and then they also have dropped contradictory leaflets that
Nice.
float over the distance
I
and are
have a
contradictory.
I have a November map of all the all the dots that were bombed. So no December bombings, no January bombings. Shall I add that to this? Shall I add that? It's just little point coverages for each bombing. What do you think? How does that
Sure.
look? Look at that.
What is this based on? Is this based on air? Jesus. Is this
This
based
is
on aerial?
Yeah, this is sat. I don't know. Yeah, it's a satellite image. So and this is remember now they didn't let up. December was just as much bombing as this. So you can double this.
And January too, the airstrikes
Yeah.
haven't they're killing civilians at the same rate. They're not fighting the resistance in the same way that they were
Mm-hmm.
in November and December.
Yeah.
But they're bombing from the air. And then look at all those bomb strikes. Everything south of that green
Rafa.
patch of Rafah
Yeah.
and Khan Yunis there, that's all supposed to be safe zone that they
Yeah.
told people to go to.
That's all supposed to be safe. So
So we're
now
talking about here 35,000 airstrikes. And according to the IDF, they fired 100,000 tank shells into Gaza before December happened. So this is,
100,000 tank shells.
yeah, they're
So
using
they're sitting
in,
out here is the idea?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
then
they're
once
just
their troops
shelling.
went in, they cut back the tank shelling once their ground forces were in. But yeah, they pre-bombed aerial bombardment and then tank shells. Just firing basically to fire that many, you basically have to be firing all day long from like all of your
Yeah.
batteries. It's
Yeah.
it's really it's unbelievable.
It's not, yeah, it's not logical. It's not done.
I mean, the thing that I'm really concerned about is that we're not talking like the death toll numbers are just not accurate. We
Mhm.
know that they're overly cautious about who they're counting. And we're just hearing stories. Just if you just watch Al Jazeera, just watch the news, you can hear from families that they're burying their family members like in the alley beside the house, and not going anywhere because everyone's afraid to move. And so those people aren't being counted.
Yeah, and they're bombing from the air. I mean, everybody probably listening knows this. They're bombing from the air, but they have specific anti-personnel weapon systems just to hunt civilians. They have quadcopters with guns, with machine guns on them. They have all kinds of things just to kill people who have no ability to fight back.
Yeah.
This is another bomb damage. There's a professor, Jamon Vandenhoek of Oregon State, and they do, I think, a weekly damage assessment. So,
I saw that the Guardian did a story today
yeah.
using that, and we talked about this off air. But if you throw that map back up, I
Oh,
think that
sure.
this is really important to point out to people is that when we do
Okay.
look at this bomb damage,
Yeah.
the area that's not bombed is agricultural land.
Yes.
It's the old settlement land. It's farmers' fields. So that's
They're,
that's what you're seeing. Those
yeah.
those those divisions in between the bomb areas, like you could
It,
literally one of the maps you could overlay
yeah, it is.
is the Israeli
Well,
settlements that used to be in Gaza.
right,
Like Khan Yunis,
right,
Gush Katif was in front of Khan Yunis and Rafah there. That's why there's not population density on the coast.
right.
Um, that's Nitzarim, just under Gaza City, which allows them to cut right to the sea. And actually, that bomb map, or the grid map that Israel put out, is
Mm-hmm,
actually a grid map that goes back to Ariel Sharon's
mm-hmm,
plan for how to divide up the Gaza Strip, both to how to populate it, how to administer it. But when Israel's dream was to take over this territory, it was cut in such a way. The settlements were set up in such a way to cut off the territory. So what you're looking at there are population centers.
mm-hmm.
And then what you're seeing that's
Yeah.
not red that's a whole other study that has to happen, which is what Israel's done to the agricultural land in the Gaza Strip, which is largely a self-sufficient
Mm-hmm.
um, agriculture. Like they're not like they've been besieged for 17 years. What they grow locally is super important to what's
Yeah, and fishing. The just yeah, just to emphasize what you said, like this, if you look at the 12th October map, there's white, which is, and then for density of built up areas, it's dark gray.
Okay,
And
yeah,
then,
right.
and
Exactly.
then, so if you look, there's these
Those are the
dark gray
middle camps
areas,
there.
Khan Yunis, Rafah, and Gaza City. And then when you look on January 29th, the red indicates the bomb damaged areas, and it's synonymous with built up areas. Every
Yeah.
built up area has been bombed.
Yeah.
So let me go back to my GIS here. So
They're saying the numbers that they're saying based on the satellite imagery that came out in the last couple of days, they're saying 75%
yeah,
plus of the buildings are destroyed in North Gaza. They're saying it's more than 50% of the entire Gaza Strip, and that includes the whole territory of Rafah, which is,
yeah.
yeah,
So
I think the third biggest.
the only thing other thing I wanted to do in terms of maps was, I mean, I had my attacks by location for January, but I mean for December, and I'll probably make this again for January. But what I wanted to say was, if you look the past few weeks, most of the fighting that I've seen, most of the announced attacks have been in Khan Yunis. But in the past week or so, there's a lot more fighting in Gaza City again.
They
There's,
reinvaded.
right. And they're
The
being
Israelis reinvaded. And you know what their first objective was? Shifa
Shifa
Hospital.
Hospital. But they've been, but I'm saying they reinvaded and they're now getting blown up as a
Yeah.
result. Like they're being
Yeah. They announced a death in the north.
the same reason that they, like, it's like we've all forgotten why they left. They didn't leave out of the goodness of their hearts. They left because they were taking so much damage, and now they're back to taking that same amount of damage. I think they may have hoped that there's been some degradation of the resistance's capacity. I don't know why they would have come to that conclusion, but there's clearly a lot of wishful thinking and delusion that's going into all these military calculations from their
Yeah.
perspective. Speaking of delusion, one of the solutions that that has been proposed was a buffer zone of 1 kilometer. So basically shrink the entire Gaza Strip by another kilometer. And I made a little map of what that would be like. Others have made this map, but it's basically taking another chunk off of Gaza when
Yeah, which is so in that belt that you're seeing across Gaza there, where it says Gaza, Gaza City, it's 6 kilometers across. Gaza's
mhm,
6 kilometers, and they want to cut at
yeah,
least a kilometer
one on either side.
the
And
border.
that's not going to happen because if they want to, like, there are continuous attacks in Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia whenever the Israelis go there. So if they were planning to create a buffer zone, they would have to be in that buffer zone. And if they were in that buffer zone, they would come under constant attack the way they are now. So
Yeah,
there's no reason to think that it would go any differently than it's going right now. If they decided they were going to stay there, maybe it would be a little slower, but
maybe it's
maybe not.
more because they're
Yeah,
able to be in
a
fixed
static,
positions, and the
exactly.
resistance is able to understand where their tunnel network underneath, and then dig up from those tunnels. So that's it's not clear that that buffer zone
What
is possible.
one thing I was trying to do when when I was making this buffer zone was I was trying to get a map of the Gaza envelope. There's no map of the Gaza envelope because nobody wants to ever define what the Gaza envelope is. And despite the descriptions of the Gaza envelope on October 7th, it's not something they want to talk about too much because it becomes quite clear what the Gaza envelope is, which is a series of fortresses that are designed for rapid assault on the prison. I mean, if you think of a prison, like the old prison model in the U.S. was, there were prison guards walking around all the time, and now the prison model is there's these special operations teams that are not inside the prison, except they come once in a while and they do these brutal operations in the prison and then they leave. And it's like that's the model. Their Israeli bases, they stay outside of the Gaza Strip and then they attack from the Gaza Strip, and they're there to make sure that the 2 million people can't have access to all of their historical and traditional lands and their villages. You guys remember probably when I showed that map. I might bring that back up, um, of um, of Salman Abu Sitta, about the Return Plan 2023, the lecture that he gave, um, at the Palestine Rights Festival, where he talked about um, how these villages. I'll just put that on the screen there. Like there's a hundred, there's 212 of these small villages, all kind of surrounding and enveloping Gaza, and they have an average of 700 people per village. And this is the land of these 2.3 million people that are crammed in. Here you have it. Salman Abu Sitta says, 150,000 settlers in a land of 2 million Palestinians. The number of these settlers is comparable to one refugee camp in Rafah. What a travesty of justice. What a travesty indeed. And these are, I guess, I don't know whether the people are back in the envelope. They're probably, some of them are still in hotels.
No, they're not.
They're not, right?
So this is
So,
the thing about the buffer zone is that historically Israel's buffer zones were in other countries. There was a
yeah,
buffer zone in Lebanon that they enforced for 15 years. And the buffer zones are now inside Israel. And so
yeah,
this is part of the unclear. So Netanyahu can't agree to this ceasefire proposal because they can't freeze this war in the way that it is right now because Israel is many miles smaller than it
right.
was on October 6th.
Yeah.
And it's not clear without significant negotiations how they're going to get Hezbollah to
Yeah.
move back off the border
S-
without either fighting or having some kind of pretty comprehensive diplomatic solution that may include returning the
Yeah,
Sheva
land.
farms.
So there's
Yeah.
a negotiation over hostages, and there may be a negotiation over land, because there are these buffer zone concepts and these settlement homes that they're planning to build and the settlement conference that they're holding. These are all fantasies. They're not feasible in the world as it exists today.
Well, they're
And
they Haaretz pointed out yesterday, they're the only people that have a plan for the day after, are these extreme right wing, um,
mm,
Zionists that want to colonize Gaza. And so they're the only ones that have a plan for what's going to happen after.
I
The
don't
Israeli
know.
state is completely unable
Yeah.
to
I don't know
handle
that
this.
I would agree to call it a plan, only because something that's based on such delusions
Yeah.
shouldn't doesn't deserve the name of
Yeah. It
plan.
says more about the lack of plans that everybody else
Yeah,
has for the day
exactly.
after.
Yeah,
But the buffer zones inside Israel is a very significant issue. The country is really has to deal with this,
mm,
and their state institutions have to deal with this because it really gets to the heart of Israel. I think we've been talking about it on this show right from the beginning that it's not clear how they're going to move all back and rebuild the
mhm,
Gaza envelope and what that's going to look like. And the north is very unclear. Hezbollah's carried out 750 attacks in the north, and their units are right up on the border, and they have no reason to leave the border.
mm,
So if there's a ceasefire on the Gaza front, um, unless it's some kind of comprehensive diplomatic, which must be what the Americans are saying to them, because the Israelis like the way out of this situation for the Israelis is diplomatically. Just agree
yeah,
to exchange prisoners, make a deal where you give, legitimate concessions.
yeah.
You can't just have like Hamas said, you can't just take something that
And
you can't
you can't
achieve on the battlefield.
impose your will on the whole world anymore.
And you can't impose your will on the Gaza Strip,
And you
of
can't
all
impose your
places.
will.
It's not built like that. And the entire security apparatus of Gaza, it's not built to protect Israeli soldiers in a buffer zone. It's
Yeah.
all built for outside the buffer
That
zone.
that
So
might be an impossible task. I don't know that that's a possible task
no.
to.
But they're destroying like it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point. They're destroying like it is, and they're getting attacked like it is.
Hmm.
The attack in Mogazi in the central camps, what was it, a couple weeks ago now, where 21 soldiers died
I don't think
in
it
a
was
single
that
event.
long. I think it just feels that long.
I
I
don't
think it
know
was probably
any.
like 8 or 9 days ago. It was in, yeah. Now we have to look
I
that up.
keep a log of all the resistance attacks, and I number the days and log them under the days. That's the only way I know what day it is right now, and I have no sense of time anymore. It's all been this one big long day. I just can't imagine what my friends are going through in Gaza.
Eight
The
days ago, John.
8 days.
8 days. Yeah.
And so would Israel have covered that? I mean, one of the things about hiding their casualties that I'm curious about is that so that attack, 21 people died, and before the Israelis announced it, there was like a lot of information on social media, a lot of
Hmm.
Israelis texting each other in these WhatsApp groups and Telegram channels and stuff, saying something devastating happened, something terrible happened. And so they kind of almost had to it. Like everyone
Yeah.
was saying that they even took too long to say what was happening, like in this country of people in a conscription army, to just lie to them to their faces like that. They were saying it was too long. So they admitted to what happened. They didn't admit to any casualty numbers, only killed soldiers
Hmm.
killed. And the previous time that they admitted to casualties was when, also in the middle camps area, when Israel was apparently trying to close a tunnel, like blow up a tunnel entrance, and the resistance fired on them, and a tank fired back at the resistance and somehow set off the explosives that the Israeli soldiers were laying, similar to the one that happened when they were laying mines. And that attack, there was an in bed, an Israeli, they were taking Israeli
Oh,
television reporters on an in bed, and they were, driving through this area or outside in this area in the middle camps, looking at a rocket lab or something like that. And the explosion happened. So
so they had
these
to admit
Israeli
that too.
journalists were like, what's the massive explosion that we're seeing right there? And so that was when they admitted to 7 casualties or 7 killed. They admitted to
Yeah.
21 in the other attack where the resistance fired a Yasin and hit the mines that they were planting. But other than that, which were both stories that why they admitted their casualties is very well known. It's because the Israeli reporters were there saying, "What is this?" And the other one was because there was WhatsApp chat stuff happening that made them have to speak. But other than that, I don't know if you followed the Israeli casualty releases,
Well,
but they're going days and days and days
yeah,
without reporting any soldiers killed.
when I was looking up this major and his unit, and there was some Israel lobby person or spokesperson who said it's now in the 500s of Israelis killed since the invasion. And so, I mean, I think you have to multiply. I don't know what you have to multiply that by, but you have to multiply that by something to get closer to the real number. I suspect
Yeah,
it's
so
in
they
the
had
low
this thing where
thousands.
when they were hiding their casualties, and they had spoke they still do have spokespeople in every single, like army officials in every single hospital, making sure that no information
Nothing
gets out.
leaks.
The Israeli press was going to do a story on it. Haaretz did a story about it, and so the Israelis said, "Oh, we're gonna start giving our
Telling the truth.
daily casualty reports."
Oh, that won't go well in
They're
Israel.
not doing it. They
Yeah.
didn't do it. At the new year rolled over to the new year, and they just stopped reporting.
Yeah, that wouldn't.
Even though we're watching videos that
Yeah,
just clearly show casualties, they're not counting them in the West Bank either.
right.
I showed a couple videos today on the Electronic Intifada live stream from the West Bank that surely had casualties, and no casualties reported. And then Hezbollah released a video a couple days ago
They
where
think
they put a best
2,000
of.
on their front. I mean, if it's 2,000 on their front, Gaza's got to be more. It's hot. It's hotter. I mean, Hezbollah has better weapons, but but it's a way hotter front. I mean, there's way more troops involved,
Yeah, he was
way
citing
more
Nasrallah was
ambushes.
citing Israeli media
Wow.
that there's 12,000 injuries.
Injuries.
10 that he was saying that that's from the Haaretz report, and it
Oh,
was a
and then
Yedio report.
he was multiplying back or making some calculation to say that must mean.
Yeah, he said in his speech, he said that according to enemy media,
Yeah.
the numbers are at least double, but um, other media reports um, suggest that it's significantly higher. Like the IDF rehab department has 4,000 people in rehab. The Haaretz article said that there was 10,000 hospital visits by civilians and soldiers from October 7th to that. That story was like late November, something like that. So yeah,
I mean,
if the numbers were double, I wouldn't be surprised.
and then you think of negotiations and a possible ceasefire in Gaza, but then what? I mean, the West Bank,
Yeah, the West Bank would be an intifada at any other. We'd be calling it an intifada. More than
and it
2,000 attacks in
and
2023.
is
Mm.
is 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 the ceasefire going to cover that? Do they have the? Can they turn that off? I mean,
I don't know. Is
yeah.
Israel going to honor it? I mean,
Is Israel
Israel's
going to honor?
arrested 3,000 people in the West Bank, like almost
Yeah,
doubled the prison population, collecting bargaining chips.
yeah.
They rearrested a couple of kids that they
That they
released.
had
Like
released.
they
Yeah,
just no honor at all. Like even on the most basic principle, like when
yeah.
having honor protects your
Benefits
own,
your yeah,
they don't have it.
yeah.
So are they just gonna, when this prisoner exchange, if they released 3,000 people,
Then they
they would
rearrest
all be
them,
innocent because they're all the people that have been arrested since October 7th.
scooped. Yeah, but then they rearrest them, and then the war starts again, right? I mean, or they count on trying to do something less than the threshold for war, and then you just get back. We're just back in the same cycle that we've been in for
Yeah, it's dark.
so long.
That's why with the electronic intifada, when we break down the resistance videos, it kind of breaks up the misery
Yeah,
that covering this story
and
is just.
covering it and like trying to project it into the future. But I mean, there's so much uncertainty, and like this land corridor between UAE, Saudi, and Jordan, it's clever, but it's one of these over clever solutions. Like they're gonna find a way to interrupt that too, you know, if the Houthis don't want that to go. Yeah, well,
Yeah. And the process of rebuilding, the way that people are living right now, like
mm,
we always do the political analysis, but people are living right now in pouring rain,
mm,
4, 5, 6 degrees, and Israel's not allowing tents in. Tents aren't coming in these aid shipments. They're considered dual use if they have any kind of poles in them. So
Israel
people
has
are
to,
stitching together the UNRWA food aid sacks that are like that
right,
kind of vinyl or whatever it is,
yeah,
that you can stitch together and use it as a
tarp.
covering.
Yeah.
So even
That's
like the ceasefire agreement should have, um,
Israel never controls anything ever again. That's what it should have.
or that the rebuilding, I mean,
Yeah,
the money for the rebuilding is going to end up in Israeli pockets. It's going to end up in American pockets. It's going to end up in European pockets. It always does for this stuff. But the effort to rebuild the Gaza Strip, um,
yeah.
it's an enormous task that will require, yeah, open borders. They can't this.
Yeah, it has to this whole thing has to be taken out of the framework that it's been in. It has to be taken out of Israeli and US control and veto power for every item that goes in. It's just there's no point. There's no point in continuing this way.
No, I mean, the Israelis admit that Hamas still controls the South.
Yeah.
The quote was firm control of the South. And the reason why they reinvaded the North was because They were
Yeah.
reestablishing the hospitals and the police force and the civil,
Yeah.
what do you call them? Civil defense, right? Like the people that are digging people out of these buildings. These municipal governance
Yeah.
services are being restored in
They're
Gaza.
ready to, yeah, they're ready to go.
They didn't defeat Hamas. They didn't dismantle the resistance. They didn't put the government out of power. They didn't even destroy things so much that people couldn't do those things.
Yeah.
And so they're going to reconstitute themselves immediately. Um, we keep saying it's not clear, but it's really not clear how Israel's even going to pretend that they won this war or that they didn't lose this war. It's going to be completely obvious to everybody, which it is already, because the Israelis keep releasing these statements about how they've stopped rocket fire,
Yeah.
and then
And then
as soon as
giant
they say
barrage
it,
from Tel
yeah.
Aviv.
So in the last few days, they've fired rockets from the south in the battle zone in southwest
Yeah.
Khan Yunis and throughout the north,
Gaza City.
firing. They didn't even destroy their rocket launchers, which are buried in the ground, which you would think if you were doing a clearing operation, you would come across them. But Israel's not doing clearing operations. They're not actually trying to hold a neighborhood and clear it of the resistance, which we've seen in the videos very clearly. The resistance fighters um,
That's what they
clearly
were
have,
waiting for. If you go and hold a neighborhood, then you're just waiting for,
but they're not even attempting to do that, right? They're
yeah.
not even pretending like they did that. And so Qassam is going to have a parade when the war is over with thousands of fighters. They're going to fire rockets. And then the question, I think the question that I have is, are you going to be able to besiege and ghettoize this population that knows now that they can break out of this thing, that's a possibility?
Yeah,
Uh,
and I guess for me, it's like if this is gonna be the last round, if you think of all of these wars since 2005, and if this is really gonna be the last one, there's a lot of things that have to be different this time.
yeah, that doesn't appear to be in these ceasefire negotiations.
Yeah.
These ceasefire negotiations appear to be prisoner exchange negotiations. And even those, I don't see Israel releasing all the prisoners right now. I don't even see them releasing 3,000 of them right now. It's just they're so right now. I don't know what word we want to use for it, but like
Contemptuous.
deranged,
Yeah.
demented. Like what
Yeah.
is the thing? They're they're not seeing clearly. Um, and it's just made life for Israelis. Uh, the whole world is seeing the legitimacy of this state.
Yeah.
Um, and the Israelis themselves don't believe in their state. They all hate their government.
Yeah, it's
Remember that they
strange
were out
the
on the
the way
streets
they're
for a
dance
year
the yeah, there's a
before the
certain
war.
edge to their TikToks now, and it's just all feels very unhinged.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, maybe I should have concluded no end in sight or started with no end in sight, but um well, we'll be back.
Thanks for having me on.
We'll be back. So, yeah, well, like and subscribe and all that stuff, please, and comment and all of those things. Much appreciated, and we'll see you again in a couple of days.
All right. See you guys.